Hey you, welcome back to another video of the animatronics getting a little bit quirky at night. So, most of you have probably heard of the game series Five Nights at Freddy's by now. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary, as a matter of fact. It's got games, books, and it even came out with a movie about a year ago. It's a game that I personally hold very near and dear. I've kind of followed it from the beginning, but I don't want to talk about all of that. I want to talk about the movie that walked so the FNAF movie could run, Willy's Wonderland. So this movie stars Nicolas Cage, who is arguably one of the most polarizing actors out there. People either love him, or they could not care less about him. So in this movie, Nick Cage plays the janitor. He doesn't have a name, and you might be asking why that is. That's because throughout the entire movie, Nick Cage does not say a single word. I think you'll find as we kind of go through this movie that it's just a giant meme, which is why it's one of my favorite movies. The movie starts out with a super spooky prologue, showing what one can assume is a couple trapped inside this building. They start running, but as they're being chased, this dude gets pulled away. You know, the woman, she takes a moment to mourn his loss and then, skedaddles, every person for themselves at the Freddy Fazbear. She runs into the main dining area, and after some faulty electrical wiring, she looks through this crevice and finds this little girl who looks like she's witnessed something very traumatic. The camera then cuts to an advertisement of Willy's Wonderland, and then she dies. Then the movie actually starts with Nick Cage driving his Camaro down this highway super fast. But, oh no, he drove over a spike strip in the middle of nowhere. And now Nick Cage, he can't drive fast anymore because he has no tire. As I kind of mentioned earlier, Nick Cage kind of plays this like super cool silent type. Like he doesn't say a single line during the entire movie. He's got the sunglasses, he's got the leather jacket, he's got the cowboy boots, he's got the caffeine addiction. Yeah, a good portion of this movie is literally just Nicolas Cage drinking an unhealthy amount of soda. Yeah, a good portion of this movie is just Nicolas Cage drinking soda. So, as any tough guy would do, he calls a tow truck to come pick him up. And after he gets a tow back to the shop, it's revealed that this town has no internet.
Oh, that over there. Yeah, we ain't got no internet in Hayesville.
And I mean, Nick Cage isn't the kind of guy to carry around cash. He probably has a Ridge wallet. But what Nick can do is spend the night cleaning this abandoned Chuck E. Cheese clone called Willy's Wonderland. And so this is where we get to meet one of the minor characters of the movie, but one of my favorite characters of this movie, Tex McAdoo. I just love Tex McAdoo's character. Like, I just think he's kind of hilarious. He's basically Doug Dimmadome, but in real life. So he welcomes Nick to the staff.
Congratulations. You are officially on staff.
And like any good boss would do, he leaves Nick to clean the place for the next 12 hours. Now's probably a good time to introduce you to the B plot of this movie, which later joins the A plot. Liv is your typical, teenage girl. She's trying to burn the place down. Apparently, she was adopted by the sheriff of this town. And so as she's trying to, burn Willy's Wonderland down, she gets caught by her mom. And I mean, as any good parent would do, she handcuffs her to the radiator for the rest of the day.
How am I supposed to take a piss?
There are chips on the coffee table and a bucket on the floor. Try not to make a mess.
And thankfully, even though this town has no internet, somehow her friends knew that she was handcuffed to this radiator and show up to free her. To quickly summarize this group of teenagers, just think of like the most stereotypical friend group of teenagers in any horror movie. You got the dumb one, you got the hot one, you got the nerdy one, you got the girl who does way too much PDA with her boyfriend in this movie. Honestly, I've never seen a more campier or like cliche group of people in a movie before. And I think it perfectly kind of juxtaposes with Nick's character, who is just the antithesis of the night guard from Five Nights at Freddy's. Liv gives them like this little talk about how Willy's Wonderland is like this place of tragedy, as you probably could have grasped by now. And then they go to burn it down. Meanwhile, though, Nicolas Cage is doing exactly what he was hired for. He just cleans the place. In addition to him just drinking a lot of soda, He also spends a lot of this movie just cleaning. Honestly, if you're one of those people on TikTok who likes to watch those cleaning or mowing videos, this movie is actually kind of satisfying to watch. But unfortunately, it doesn't last because while Nick is cleaning up, one of the animatronics comes to life. One thing I will say about this movie is in an industry that is sort of funded by poorly done CGI, it's nice to see that all the animatronics are done with just practical effects. And granted, yeah, there is some CGI like the FNAF movie, but most of the screen time dedicated to the animatronics and these fights are all practical effects, which I thought was super cool. Unlike the FNAF movie though, they don't build forts. Instead, Nick Cage beats the shit out of the animatronics. Yeah, he breaks his broomstick over his knee and then just starts going to town on Ollie the ostrich here. And you know, after a bit of back and forth, he rips its spine out. I like how despite he doesn't say a line in this movie, this is like the only time Nick Cage gets vocal at all. And in my opinion, the editing only makes it better because you've got these like this dramatic color grading and these like shaky post effects that make it look super overdone, but it's also hilarious. One thing I do kind of appreciate about this movie is that the animatronics kind of bleed. You know, when Nick Cage beats them up enough, they start to bleed oil. Before making this video, I actually thought that this was an inaccuracy, but after, you know, doing a quick Google search, I found that animatronics are made with pneumatics and hydraulics, which have oil in them. So assuming these guys use hydraulics, it actually does make sense for them to bleed oil when Nick Cage, you know, breaks them. Now, one thing some might not like about this movie is it's almost kind of like a song. You know, you've kind of got a verse, a bridge, and then a chorus, and then it kind of just keeps repeating itself. Like this movie, Nick Cage cleans, beats up an animatronic, and then goes drink soda. And that's kind of the whole formula of the movie with some alteration thrown in, you know, to kind of spice things up. But if you ask me, I think it works really well, actually. Like, the way this formula is executed, I think is done in a way that it doesn't feel boring. One thing I find funny is that Nicolas Cage doesn't really need any weapons or anything to just beat these guys to death. Like, he kills this monkey with a plunger and by curb stomping it on a urinal. It's just a shame, though, that the animatronics wait until after he's cleaned the place up to attack, and then the fight happens, which causes them to bleed oil everywhere. Like, that's not coming out of those white walls. But one thing I can't deny is that this man's routine is effective. I mean, by the end of this movie, this guy has the place looking spiffy. So while Nick is making the place look fabulous and also pulping some animatronics, the teens go to torch the place. They douse the outside of the building with gasoline, but then they realize that Nicolas Cage is in there.
Hey, sir! Sir! You're not safe in there. We gotta get you out.
And not wanting to lose such a cultural icon, they try to get him to come out. But Nick Cage is a man of his word, and he's not going to leave this place until it's spotless. So instead of trusting Nick to do his work, Liv goes in after him. But this ends up with the entire group going to the ceiling and then falling through it into this ball pit.
No, Chris!
Liv tries to go for the kill while one of them is performing on stage, but Nick won't let her. He might have been thinking, you know, why doesn't Nick just kill them all at once while they're waiting on stage? Why does he wait for them to surprise attack him and then kill them? And the movie doesn't really bother to explain this. I guess he's just got a routine that he's got to stick to, you know? He's just the way he is. I like to think, though, that, you know, Nick took the knife away from her, not because he really needed it. No, he took it away because he didn't want Liv stealing his kills. So the group of teens realizes that Nick has already killed 2 of the animatronics and that they might actually have a chance to kill the rest. So they follow Nick off to the break room while he plays some pinball. Except for Bob and Kathy, who are the dumbest people in the entire movie. You know, in a place full of murder animatronics, you'd think you'd maybe try to stick to the group, you know, strengthen numbers, but instead, no, they wander off to the super happy fun room, which is then revealed to be the place where the serial killers of this movie killed families and then later sacrificed themselves to live forever inside of the animatronics. I do think, though, it's kind of interesting that the main murder robots of this movie aren't possessed by children like FNAF is. I think it gives the animatronics a more plausible reason for just wanting to be murdering people. Apparently, though, the entire town knows that the animatronics are possessed. And to appease them and to prevent them from breaking out of the place and, you know, killing random citizens of the town, they get unsuspecting people like Nick Cage to come work the place for the night to be sacrificed. So we then cut to Bob and Kathy, who are kind of checking out the super happy fun room, and then for whatever reason decide to fuck. Kathy points out that one of the animatronics is looking at them, and this is all Bob has to say.
It's staring at us.
Well, then let's give it a show. What you talking about?
And as you could probably expect, they get brutally murdered. You know, while Bob and Kathy are in there having their fun and dying, the gang is looking for them until one of them gets impaled by a giant foam sword. I mean, I guess these things were designed by serial killers, but also, like, they did not care about any liability, did they? While these innocent teenagers are getting absolutely murdered by these animatronics, Nick Cage is doing his thing, playing a sweet, sweet game of pinball and having a soda. Luckily though, Nick's break ends early enough to save Liv from the killer knight. Unfortunately though, he could not get there in time before this chameleon gaslit Chris into thinking that it was one of the good guys, and then proceeding to snap his neck. At some point throughout this movie, one of them calls the police, and after the sheriff lady realizes that her precious daughter is at Willy's Wonderland, she decides to go save her.
Put your balls on, Evan. We're going to Willy's.
And on the way over, it's actually revealed that the crying girl in the prologue is Liv. Apparently, the sheriff took pity on her and decided not to feed her to Willy, just subject her to years worth of untreated trauma and PTSD. Before Nick can lock in the triple kill though, he's gotta go take a break. So he hands Liv his knife and goes to play some pinball, baby, yeah! Woo! So after the chameleon and Liv, you know, fight a bit, Nick Cage just effortlessly comes back and incapacitates it. But before he can dispose of it, the sheriff shows up with the gun to his face.
Drop the lizard.
Honestly, I think it's really funny how Nick Cage can clearly just dispose of 7-foot-tall murder robots, but he won't even touch this frail old woman. And I think it's just because, you know, Nick Cage is a nice guy. So Nick Cage gets left there handcuffed as a sacrifice. Preceding that is my favorite scene in this entire movie. While handcuffed, Nick Cage takes not one, but two of these animatronics on, and there's this shot where he's kind of nodding and egging them on, and this is one of my favorite shots in the whole movie because there's so much going on. Like, you've got this dramatic color grading, these fake lens flares, this like shake post effect happening, all while this is happening, and it actually looks terrible. But I've never seen a man so eager to do anything in his life. Unfortunately, before the deputy can make it back safely with Liv, the tortoise animatronic kills him. But luckily, Liv hits him in the balls. Do animatronics have balls? Does Freddy Fazbear have Freddy Faz balls? As you probably could expect, Nick scores another flawless double kill, crushing Siren Sarah's skull between his thighs. It should have been me. And he stares down Willy. But before he can start the final boss fight, he must take a break. And you guessed it, he makes love to his pinball machine. The original soundtrack for this movie is unironically really good. Like, I could listen to the Willy's Wonderland theme all day because it just goes so hard. And after that intense moment of passion, Nick drinks another soda and goes back out there. Unfortunately for him though, the sheriff wakes up and again sends Nick back into the pizzeria to be a sacrifice for Willy. I kind of want to know, like, do these animatronics just like killing people, or do they need to, like, eat them to survive? Unfortunately, we'll never know, because the sheriff gets ripped in half. Willy has Nick on the ropes. You know, Nick is at the lowest he's ever been. And as he's bleeding out in this ball pit, he finds the strength to keep going. He tapes his broomsticks back together, and with the power of soda, he manages to kill Willy. The next morning, we get an interaction between Tex McAdoo and the repair guy. Apparently, Tex just gets to keep the Camaro because they assumed Nick was dead. I wonder if this town just, steals nice things from the people they've effectively looted from, but to Tex's dismay, Nick survived. There's this little scene where Tex and the repair guy contemplate reopening the place because, it's cleaned up and now all the demons are gone. But then Siren Sarah blows them up. And as for Liv, well, she just gets in Nick's car and they drive off into the sunset drinking soda. Hopefully, by now you can understand why this is one of my favorite movies. It's truly an ironic and iconic masterpiece, and I think it's funny how it kind of rips on a franchise that's a bit more serious, like Five Nights at Freddy's. And as someone who also enjoys that series, I thought this was just a hilarious movie. I mean, the movie is quite literally just the question, what if the night guard from Five Nights at Freddy's just decided to fight back? So if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend you watch it. Because my review is only just a general overview, and there's a lot I have to cut out. This one's also on Disney Plus / Hulu. They kind of are the same thing now. Also, I've watched this movie several times. The first time I watched this movie was years ago, and since then, I've watched this movie several times, and I wouldn't have heard of it if it wasn't for Elvis the Aliens review, so I've linked that in the description below if you want to check that out. But anyways, that's all I have for you today. Let me know what you think of Willy's Wonderland down in the comments below, and if you like this video, leave it a like, and I'll see you next time, where I break down the entire Five Nights at Freddy's lore. Bye!